Hello, everyone. It is Kristan Weisdack again in another episode on our channel Beyond Behavior here. And I have the incredible Jaci Finnemann with me today. She is the CEO, founder, chief in charge, amazing mom, creator of Hello World that's actually rebranding to No Problem Parenting. So welcome, Jaci. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thank you, Kristan. I'm so excited to be here after having you on my podcast. This is a fun swap, right?
Yeah, it was a great experience. I really appreciate that. Now, speaking of your podcast, the Hello World, you're talking about rebranding to No Problem Parenting. Whatever inspired you to do this? Because I know you started this back in 2013. So you've been doing it for quite some time. What started the spark for you?
Right. Well, so we are rebranding. So the podcast is called the No Problem Parenting Podcast. So I was a counselor, in-home family counselor for 20 years. So I worked directly with kiddos who had mental health diagnoses, directly with them in their home. And the kiddos were my clients. And so I was helping them with lots of different types of behavior management things. So kids all on the spectrum of mental health, right? Which includes even diagnoses like autism. Right. Autism spectrum. I specialized in reactive attachment disorder. So kiddos who haven't bonded or connected or joined with their primary caregivers, because, within the first 3 years of life, there was a break in the attachment, and that could be due to abuse, neglect, separation from their primary caregiver. So lots of times kids who have been adopted, depending on their adoption story, or medical pain. We can deliver babies at a pound, but we can't touch them at a pound because their skin isn't developed yet. So it would literally burn them if we touch them. So there's some separation issue with that, concerns with that. And so that was my specialty, but I worked with, still kind of is, I worked with just a range of kids. I did child protection for 10 years. So I was helping with supervised visits and helping judges make decisions on whether or not a parent could parent their child, whether the kiddo could be placed back into the home if they were removed for abuse or neglect. And then eventually I grew up with this agency. So the agency that I worked for for 20 years. And eventually what happened is I started getting into coordination roles and taking on different jobs that I really didn't want, but I grew up with the company. The director, knew I knew what I was doing, kind of thing. And we started expanding mental health into early childhood Head Start programs and into school systems, where schools often have a school counselor, but not a mental health counselor. So I was helping to support, I think we had a team of just over 80 therapists and counselors at the time. And so I started driving to 32 different counties throughout the state of Minnesota, driving 3,000 to 5,000 miles a month, was gone all the time. And our son was about 7 when I started being like, okay, he's in travel sports now. I'm never going to be around. I'm not going to be able to be home to see this. We were blessed with 1 kiddo and 2 angel babies. And I just thought I'm working with attachment stuff, right? And I'm not able to spend time with my own kiddo. So plus the system was changing. Everything was you had to have a mental health diagnosis for me to be able to help families. And I didn't necessarily agree with that. And then, not that I'm against diagnosing. And then also I couldn't coach the parents without the child being present, because the child had to be present in order for me to bill the insurance companies. And that just rubbed me wrong. I didn't want kiddos to be in the room when their parent was complaining about them, right? If they were really frustrated. And I also didn't want the kiddos in the room if the parents were really worried about the child and sharing all their fears in front of the child, because I didn't think kids needed to see that mom or believe that mom and dad weren't capable of, taking care of them or knowing what to do for them. And I also didn't want to have the kiddo around when I was coaching the parent, because the minute I would leave, this happened a lot, the parent would try to do something that I suggested, and the kiddo would say, "That's not how Jaci said to do it." And so there was that dynamic too. And so it was weighing on my mind for quite a long time that I really wanted to get back to the root of why I went into the field in the first place, which was really to support kids and families in the day in, day out, real life struggles outside of the therapy office. So again, I love therapy. There are tons of therapies out there. And an avid learner and I love learning about all the new therapies and things that I didn't want to be a therapist. And I never did become a therapist, never became licensed, did not want to diagnose, I just wanted to help families day in, day out. Well, I was, as the system changed, there were more barriers that prevented me from actually just being able to meet parents at where they were at in their regular everyday. You didn't have to have a child with attachment disorder. You could have a regular teenager who, maybe had a low self-esteem that was getting into doing risky behaviors or doing things, and I can. So, but that's not insurance billable. That's not diagnosable. So then I couldn't, in my other job, I wasn't able to help families, who were going through that kind of a thing. So I was at a CAST conference because at this point in 2012, I was a coordinator for over 80 therapists and counselors. And so I started going to leadership conferences because I didn't go into the business thinking I'd be a leader. I was going to be a counselor, right? And so I went to this telecast conference and really not liking my job and not, thinking, what are they going to teach me that's going to help me motivate my staff or that's going to help us with, the paperwork struggles that we have or whatever in this system. And so I wasn't feeling really good about being at the conference. But then during the intermission after lunch, so it was telecast, these silhouette dancers came up on the screen. And they were dancing to a song by Lady Antebellum called Hello World. And I heard that song before, but never in that way. And so these silhouette dancers dressed in full body leotards, I think the leotards were white and they were like on a black screen, but they were forming words and pictures with their bodies, like connecting their bodies to spell out words like faith and belief and peace and love. And I get goosebumps even thinking about it. I wish I had a recording of it. This is, 9 years ago. And I wish I had the recording, can't find it. But pictures and just different than like flowers and birds. And I mean, it was amazing what they did. And here I am sitting in this conference with 300 business people in the center table in the front row. And tears are just streaming down my eyes. And I just thought this was the most beautiful thing that I had ever seen. And I thought to myself, I just, I want to help kids and families and I need to find a different way to do that. So after the intermission, the host of the conference in our local area, she handed out a piece of paper and said, write down 3 goals that you hope to achieve after attending this conference. So I wrote a personal goal and then I wrote a professional goal. And then I wrote, someday when I have the courage, when I'm brave enough, I'm going to leave this company that I thought I'd retire from, right? And I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to call it Hello World. And its mission is going to be awakening attachment. And a year and a half later, I did just that. Based on the song, that's the name of my Hello World is the name of my company based off of that song. But the goldfinch is my logo. And that is because about a year later, I was sitting at my home office and my back was to the window and I hear this tap, tap, tap. Now I just gotten off the phone with a disgruntled employee, somebody we were going to have to terminate. I had been up the night before till 1 answering emails. I had just this really full, stressful day. And even though that conference motivated me to start thinking about a change, you get back to work on Monday after, the woo-woo conference and you're like, yeah, status quo, this like, who am I to start a company on my own, right?
Yes.
Really silly, Jackie. So I just got back to work. But then this particular day, I hear this tap, tap, tap on my window. I kind of ignored it. I was too busy in my emailing and whatever, what's going on. And then I hear tap, tap, tap again. And I turned around and this beautiful goldfinch was perched on my window. Now, black eye mask, it's just this beautiful bright yellow bird. And we'd lived in the country at that point for 12 years, never seen a goldfinch, probably didn't pay attention to it if I did see one, right? But that particular day, it was so beautiful. And I just lost it, tears streaming down my eyes. And I start talking to my mom who had passed 8 years prior or 9 years prior. And no, it was more than that. Anyway, I just like, I'm looking at this goldfinch who's like turning its head and, you know, looking at me through the window. And I'm like, I know, Mom, I need to do something different, but I don't know what I would do. And I'm not going to go work for another agency. Like this agency was home to me. They were family. And, so anyway, I kind of lost it, and I'm talking to this goldfinch as if it's my mom and, you know, whatever. And the next day I went to, what's that?
Perfectly normal things when you want to change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not stressed out at all, right?
I laugh because I've been there, but I love your story. Yes, please continue.
Yeah. So then the next day I went to the main office in an hour from my home, and I ran into one of my colleagues, Pam, and I was telling her about the goldfinch. I'm like, okay, I'm losing it. Like, I don't know, you know, here's what happened. She said, oh, Jackie, we have to look that up. I'm like, look that up. What are you talking about? She's like, well, there's a spiritual meaning behind that. There's a reason why this goldfinch is sending you a message. I'm like, okay, Pam, you know, I'm a spiritual person, you know, I'm Christian. I'm like, okay. She's like, no, we need to look that up. And so she pulls it up on this site and she said, look at what the goldfinch is trying to tell you. In transition of physical to spiritual, aids in understanding the power of your voice and your own song. Goldfinch teaches the value and importance of changes, healthy family resolutions, along with balance and harmony in dealing with people. The goldfinch will teach you to awaken to once hidden choices. I was like, that's interesting. Okay, it's a little woo-woo for me, but like that was really cool. So I thanked her for that. I went on with my 300, mile day. Travel to different meetings and such. And I just kept thinking about it. I'm like, company and, like the power of your own voice and your own song. And of course, I think about the year prior when Hello World, the song had come into mind, like, maybe there's something to this. So, but again, status quo, went back to work. Well, you can listen to episode 32 of my podcast to learn the whole thing. But in short, I will tell you that not long after that, I had seen an owl on our deck railing. We had never seen an owl in our yard before, but there was this owl there. And so of course I had to go look up the owl when I saw this, unusual creature in my yard. And that one too, to reveal more of your intuitive nature. The owl shows up in your life to listen and look out for the subtle signs that are around you and be attentive to what usually goes below your radar. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Fast forward a few more weeks, and there was a deer outside of my window. I was having a really rough day. And I think I went to the window like, okay, goldfinch, where are you? Like I need some inspiration, ha, ha, ha. And, but no kidding, there was a fawn in my backyard with a spotted fawn. Now this was the fall of the year. They're typical in our area in the spring, but a baby fawn is not typical in the fall, much less had no mommy around, no mother deer around. So it was so cool. And again, I have pictures of each of these, of these animals, but the deer, the message from the deer is to still the voice of the self-critic and treat yourself with gentleness and understanding. I was super stressed out at this point and like constantly second guessing myself with the decisions I was having to make, dealing with employees who I really felt for, having the system changing so much, and they were just all the paperwork and all the things they were going through. So it was a rough time and I wanted out. If nothing else, I just wanted to go back to being a counselor and not a coordinator because it was just too much pressure and I was gone so much. So it's telling me, the deer is telling me to treat myself with gentleness, right, and understanding, and be myself and continue along my path. It says, seek out your inner treasures and use them generously to help those around you. Trust that kindness and graciousness will be well received. Deer teaches us to maintain our innocence and gentleness so we can share our open-heartedness with others. And we can, it sees between the shadows and can hear what isn't being said, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just like, okay, that's a cool message too. All of these things kind of resonated with me. I mean, I wasn't seeing, a squirrel that was out of the ordinary. I wasn't seeing, some like a raccoon or a, somebody asked me one time, like a lizard. We don't have those in Minnesota. We have salamanders. But anyway, so I'm toying with this idea that God is really the universe. Somebody is telling me I need to make a career change and that I can do this, that I could go start my own company, but I'm not believing it yet. So what did I do? I asked my, at the time, 8-year-old. And I said, Andrew, he asked me one day, he said, Mom, you look sad. Are you okay? And I said, well, actually I am. And I'm kind of stressed out with work. And I kind of tell him a little bit what's going on. And I said, and it's really interesting. My friend Pam told me about, I told him about the goldfinch, the owl and the deer, and told him what Pam had taught me to do with as far as looking them up. So I pulled up my BlackBerry phone. This dates the story. And I show him the picture of the goldfinch that I got and the picture of the owl and the picture of the deer. And I said, Andrew, I think God is telling me that I need to do this. And I said, but I'm not sure if I'm just making that up in my head or if it's really God calling me to do it. And he says, well, duh, Mom, of course it's God. And I said, but Andrew, how do you know? And he said, well, Mom, G is for goldfinch, O is for owl, and D is for deer. And that spells God.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
Right? Out of the mouths of babes. As adults, I think so often we're in our head and we have to have everything figured out and it has to be realistic and logical and all of that. But my innocent 8-year-old, hadn't been so programmed yet, right? Mm-hmm. Starts in kindergarten when we start programming our kids that way. But, really he was open to hearing and paying attention. And so, yeah, I do a whole workshop on paying attention to the signs around you. There were other signs. We did have snakes, which is an interesting story. I had a day where I had a 300-mile day on the road, and I drank a lot of coffee back then. And every gas station I stopped at, I had to change the toilet paper roll that day. It was 5, I don't remember how many, but I kept having to change the toilet paper. After the second time, I got smart and checked for toilet paper before I went to the bathroom. But it was I kept having, I'm made fun of this. I was like, oh yeah, okay, God, what is that? Change the toilet paper roll. What's the sign, Right. And it actually dawned on me, change your roll. So there were some fun things like that in there too. But lo and behold, I listened, finally paid attention to that. And about a month later, in September of 2013, I resigned from my coordinator role and gave my director time to find another person to fill the position, which took a couple of months. But by mid-November, I was able to leave the coordinator role. I stayed on part-time as a counselor because I was nervous about, oh my gosh.
That leap of faith is hard to take sometimes when you can't see where you're landing.
Absolutely. And so, but November 26, 2013, Hello World was started. So now I'm a parenting coach.
Yeah. And I resonate a lot with that story because I think my mind brings me images sometimes when I'm working with a kiddo for an intervention or just as I'm in conversation with somebody. And I think about when we're born, we're like this lump of clay and the universe just brushes up against us. The people that we're surrounded with, the encounters that we have just mold us into this person that we're going to become. And we get these subtle signs from God, the universe. And sometimes they just keep getting louder and louder. And taking that leap of faith is such a scary thing. And it's just, in addition to talking about Hello World and what I do, it's just the mindset of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Just being a woman, a business owner, it's so difficult because you're just not sure. When you're in a role, you work for a company, you know exactly what you're going to do and it's all mapped out for you. You got a map, a compass, a tour guide, you've got the director of the tour. But whenever you're an entrepreneur, it's like being a parent, right? And parenting is problematic, just like stepping into the role of an entrepreneur. So I think it resonates so nicely with what you're doing with No Problem Parenting, because you're really giving people that roadmap. You're that tour guide, and now you're helping those parents, you're helping those daycare providers, you're helping the attorneys, you're helping so many people. So how do you find time to do it all? So you're married, you have a 17-year-old, and you're offering online classes, you're offering one-to-one coaching, you have a membership directory. So how do you find time to do all these things?
Well, fortunately, I have learned a lot over the years, and my most recent discovery is that I can't do it alone. I mean, it's not that I can't. I don't like the word can't. It's I don't want to do it alone anymore. So I have actually hired some help, as I have an assistant now, so that's great. What I think the biggest lesson that I've had throughout everything, though, is really is having confidence and believing in myself. When I waver, I don't get as much done, and I get really distracted in my thoughts, right? Imposter syndrome, or some of that stuff steps in for all the entrepreneurs watching right now. I'm sure everybody can relate to that. So having, I don't want to say systems. I have studied and taken about any course and every type of course that is out there for how to run your own company, because I didn't have any clue. I didn't have entrepreneurship on my radar. Growing up, it was never something I thought I could do. And a month after starting my own company, I went on panic pills, because I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Where's my 401k? Where's my, security? And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, when you work for another company, I was super confident. There's a reason why we were a circular agency, but basically worked myself up the ladder. Right. There's a reason why I did that, because I had a lot of confidence when I started my own company. It was great at first. And then it was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know how to coach. That's my craft. That's my calling. But all these systems or other things, I had to kind of learn it as I go. So how I do it all now is I have a great coaching group that I'm in. I have a coach myself. That is key. And then I have a good support community within that group, and a couple of other ones right now, other networking groups. But really it's focusing on 3 things at a time. What are my 3 key things? And then when you start something new or whatever, to stick with it, to see how it's going to play out.
But I love that too, because I always look to say, when I'm going to hire somebody or work with somebody, making sure that they have the same systems in place that they're coaching me about, and just like you were talking about, you have all of that, but also you were talking about that lack of confidence. It's if you watch your sister's kids, you get to give them back, first of all, but then it's well, this is the schedule. This is exactly what we're going to do. But then when you have your own kids, it's just like starting your own business. And you were talking about that confidence, your confidence just, falls through the floor. So I think being able to have such a great systematic approach to what you do coming into your program, I think that just speaks volumes, because you have support on really every level. You have the one-on-one coaching, you have the groups, you have the podcasts to give everybody confidence. So if a parent were to come to you for one-on-one coaching, give us an example of what that might look like. How would you begin?
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that with the, when you watch your sister's kids. The other thing about that is we are, as a sister myself, sometimes it's easier to watch the other kids, right? Because you know what the plan is and all that, but you also think you have a good perspective on what they could be doing or how they could be helping or raising their kids. This is really tricky in our family, because I was a counselor for many years and then now a parenting coach. I try not to offer unsolicited advice and be a sister at the same time, which as a sister, I want to just offer that, right? Unsolicited stuff because I'm a sister, but I have to be a little bit careful. And I was always learning, catching myself with that. But the thing with being a parenting coach, and what a lot of people don't realize, I didn't even know what a parenting coach was when I became one. I was like, do people actually hire for that? Right? It is so great, because instead of just going to the people that you know best, your closest friends, family, your own mother or father, reaching out to somebody else, they don't know you in any other way than what you're calling about, right? And what you're dealing with. They don't have all these other assumptions or judgments about you, even if they're not, poor judgments, but they're still judgments, right? And so when parents reach out to me, sometimes it's one session and my online course. The course I created called Becoming a No Problem Parent. It's 96 minutes. Videos are broken up into 2-minute to 10-minute segments. It's not rocket science, right? It's a foundational kind of thing. I created it because after the first 6 years or 5 years of having Hello World, I started to notice some common things that I was sharing with families, regardless of their situation, whether their child had a mental health diagnosis, a different ability, or they were just dealing with a growing pain kind of thing. I was saying the same 3 things. And so I thought I should put this in a course. So I did 2 pilot programs of 10 groups of parents in each one before I created it or finished it up, to see if it was even something parents were interested in, something they would buy or invest their time in. And it turns out it's exactly what they wanted and needed. And it's a generalized course because, of course, we're not specific to any sort of one behavior. But so that's what a lot of times the families will say, if you're okay, not everybody likes to watch a course, but if you want a DIY kind of program, this is a really good foundational program. I'm going to teach you 3 things. Seek first to understand, why is your child behaving the way they're behaving? And why are you as the parent responding or reacting the way that you're responding or reacting? Step 2 is to prepare for the worst. Of course, life throws us curveballs. As a parent, we can never be fully prepared for what our kids, throw out at us or what life does. But there are certain behaviors that happen time and time again where you're just like, oh my gosh, nothing's working. No matter what I do, they don't listen, And those are the things that we can be prepared for. So I teach you how to be prepared so that you don't have to react. You don't have to fear. You don't have to worry so much. We're always going to worry because we're parents, but I help dispel a lot of that, or disperse a lot of, expel a lot of that. And then step 3 is to change the conversation. By the time you've done step 1 and 2, you've already, in the first day, you've already started to change the conversation with your kids. But I go into a little bit in step 3, a little bit more detail about how I think parents are too nice these days. We're giving our kids too much praise and they don't even believe it. They're not even buying it. We're trying to convince our kids that they're good. So step 3 is all about having that come from the inside out with your child.
And I love that. It's like picturing like you're going cross-country trip with your kids and you're not sure, where you're going to end up or how you're going to get there. Your program provides more and more certainty.
Mm-hmm.
It gives them these specific details that are working, that have worked for many, many other parents. And I just think it's an incredible resource. So I talked a little bit about, you have online courses, one-to-one coaching, and then your membership community. So talk to us a little bit about your membership community. What does that look like?
Well, so we're still kicking all that off, but once you become a member of No Problem Parenting, you get the course, right? And then you get a year-long access and to any of the trainings that I do absolutely free throughout the year. We are building a resource community, which is going to include people like you, Kristan, and your program. I was so glad that we connected and that we found each other, because I've already sent several people your way. But the resource page will have a list of resources for you to really, niche down to what is the problem that your kiddo is going through. So if it is a sensory issue, if it is a dietary issue, if it is, your child is a specific age, their toddler or their teen or their, whatever, you're going to have, my resource page is going to help connect you with people that I vetted, that I have found to be helpful, have good results, that offer some things free so you can test it out first instead of just spending a bunch of money on something that you don't know if it's really. And then, I do other lives or Q&A kinds of things. You can text me with the members, being a part of the membership community, if you have a quick problem you'd like to solve. As long as you've watched the course and you have an understanding of No Problem Parenting and that foundational stuff, you can get a quick phone call with me without having to pay an additional charge for that.
I love that. There's so many resources all in one place. I'm already thinking as you're talking, some people to connect you with as well. So we'll have to have another aside conversation beyond this. So.
Well, and the podcast, when I started that just a year ago in April, it's been on my mind for a couple of years, because I know parenting is tough and it's expensive. And it's time consuming with everything we have going on. So sometimes you really want support and you want to reach out to somebody, but you maybe don't know how in the heck you're going to fit it into your schedule, or how are you going to pay for it? And again, these services, sometimes HSA accounts will pay for it, but, oftentimes it's out of pocket. And I get that. So the podcast, I thought, you know what, I'm going to start that, and I'm just going to give a bunch of my stuff away on, it's not the same as having one-on-one, but I want to share. My goal is really to share what I know. If it can help somebody, I think I should be able to share it. Now, I thought the podcast would be my way of sharing that, right? Well, then all of a sudden I started getting all these guests that were reaching out to me to be on the show, like within a matter of a month of having the podcast out there. I'm like, how does that happen? How do they even know about my little podcast? Shouldn't even be on their radar yet. So I have interviewed more than 50 people throughout the course of this last year. I don't even have time to do my own episodes. And at first I thought, well, I can't do that because parents want to hear from me and more about no problem parenting. But I got to tell you, resources like BehaviorWorx and you, Kristan, I am so grateful to be able to share that with my families, because you specifically help in a way that I don't, right?
Yeah, likewise. It's all about creating that. It's all about creating that synergy for families.
Yeah. So that's why I created the podcast, and now that's going. Even this last in May, we aired 2 episodes a week, just because I had so many people. I'm like, these are such good resources. I can't wait to do one a week. So I think we're caught up now, but yours is episode 63. So if anybody is listening today and wants to go check that one out, they can go to the No Problem Parenting podcast and search episode 63 with Kristan.
Yeah, I love it. And we're going to share all this information on our YouTube channel as well. So more and more people can reach out to you and they'll know about your resources. So your website, some of your contact details, how can people find more out about what you're doing and connect with you?
Yeah, so we just switched the website over. So it's noproblemparents.com. So no problem parents with an S on the end. We switched that from helloworldmn.com. You can still get there either way. And then we also have a landing page that describes the course and the membership community, and that's noproblemparenting.com.
I love that. I love it. Just everything that you're doing. So we're going to have all of your contact details. We're going to share it on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and I'm going to also be sending some parents your way as well, because on the opposite side, I think parents really need their own resources because they're stressed out. They don't want to go to people that they know. And you offer a really lovely balance of all of the things that they need. So we're going to be sending more people your way too, and sharing this out to our community. So thank you.
I really appreciate that so much, Kristan, because really, and it is true. What I say is my shtick is become the confident leader your kids crave you to be. Mm-hmm. When we feel confident as parents, everything else is a little bit easier, right? So I've worked with families, again, that have had to put their children in placement because they were too dangerous to be at home, risk-taking behaviors, that sort of thing. I've worked with, a large gambit of families. And once you have confidence, everything else is just that much easier. So I can help you do that.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jaci. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.